Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Herp Monday number 27, and yes, it is a Tuesday. I apologize. Today we are going to be talking about a reptile that's very near and dear to my heart and to many people in my state. Today we are talking about the Texas horned lizard. Texas horned lizard, or scientific name Phrynosoma cornutum. Again, that is Phrynosoma cornutum. It is part of the family Phrynosomatidae, which is the family, basically you can think of all the spiny lizards found in the United States and Mexico region. It has other common names. The most common name you're going to hear this called is actually the horny toad or the horned toad. It is obviously not a toad, it is a reptile. The name comes from the fact that it's got this very roundish body and a very blunt snout. Its range extends from south central US to northern Mexico, so think Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma. These are very commonly where you're going to find these. There are other introduced populations across the U.S. And one reason why I said this is near and dear to myself and the rest of the people in my state is this is actually the state reptile of Texas. They are usually found in hot, sandy habitats, so think real dry. But unlike other, sort of desert species, these actually really need vegetative cover. So it's not just barren sand that these need. These actually do need some vegetation, usually bunch grasses, things like that. As you can tell, and where the common name comes from, it does have horns, and these are actually true horns. The horns are actually extensions of the cranium and contain true bone. These are not just modified scales. These are true bone spurs coming out of the skull. Now, the ones on the back and on the side right here, those are actually modified scales. Now, it does have a very variable color pattern, but usually you're going to find them, especially in Texas, with this sort of dark brown, gray with black, yellow strips in the back. This white line down the back is pretty indicative of the Texas horned lizard. I'm not sure if the rest of the horned lizards have this line, but this is a sort of coloration pattern that you're going to find in a lot of ways. You're going to have some bands on the tail as well, but quite frankly, it's very hard to mistake this for any other lizard. It is the largest bodied horned lizard of the western US and Mexico. Its average length is 69 millimeters or 2.7 inches from snout to vent. So basically not including the tail. So you can think from the tip of the nose to about right here. So that's about its average. The largest males, though, are going to measure 94 millimeters, which that's about 3.5 inches, 3.7. And the females are going to measure 114 millimeters, 4.5 inches. It is very important to note that is from the snout to the tail, and these do get very wide. They are very flat lizard. So people are going to think that they're actually bigger than what they actually are, and they can really modify their body in ways. We'll get into that. These are an extremely docile lizard. If you manage to catch them, you can usually hold them very well. You can rub their bellies and they'll be pretty stationary once you get them. These are not a super aggressive lizard, unless you're something that it wants to eat. It is a sunbather lizard as well. So, you've seen lizards basking in the sun. Well, these actually really depend on sun to survive. So most of the time, these are actually going to be out on some type of rock, or where you commonly see these is on the side of roads or on the edge of the roads where they're sitting there basking in the sun. But at night, they'll bury themselves into sand. That sand retains the warmth from the day, and so they'll bury themselves in the sand quite quickly and efficiently as well. Now, where these are found, these are actually usually found near harvester ant hills, because ants are actually an incredible portion of their diet, is specifically harvester ants. Harvester ants usually comprise about 70% of their natural diet. They will eat other insects, so you can see here it's eating a different ant. I believe that's a different ant. They'll eat grasshoppers, they'll eat crickets, they'll kind of eat most insects, but they're predominantly going to be eating red harvester ant. And what they'll do is they'll actually sit at the entrance of one of those ant piles and just pick off a couple as they come out. And what it'll do is it'll just sit there, and whenever it decides to eat, it'll turn its head, pick out an ant, and then shoot out its tongue, and it does have a sticky tongue, to grab an ant and eat. These usually don't move very much. They kind of think of a rattlesnake sort of hunting strategy. These basically go to a spot and just kind of sit there, and then they go to a different spot to sunbathe, and then they go to a spot to sleep. They're not very mobile. But that's not to say that these can't move very fast when running from predators, people. These will dart into vegetation relatively quickly. They're usually very easy to find after that, because they'll usually only run a couple of meters maybe and then stop and basically depend on their camouflage to hide themselves. However, they are also excellent diggers, and they will bury themselves to run away as well. And in a sandy environment, they can bury themselves, and they're very difficult to find because of their camouflage pattern. Now, the predators of this species of lizard are going to include dogs, not just dogs, but canids, canines, so think coyotes, foxes, things like that. Other snakes are going to eat them, and birds are particularly fond of them as well. However, the horns of this species, so these horns right around the crown of the head, have been known to puncture all the throats of all of these predators except for one. So what happens is they'll swallow, and those spikes will catch in the throat and puncture the esophagus. Except for one species, there's never been, to my knowledge, known the horns to puncture one throat. That is actually of the greater roadrunner. Greater roadrunners love eating horned lizards. You can catch them relatively easy if they see them. And what a roadrunner will do is it will go and pick up a Texas horned lizard and then smash it against a rock to basically shatter the skeleton, and then they'll turn it around and swallow the head first, so that those spikes are pushed backwards. And since the skeleton is completely destroyed, it doesn't really have that rigidity that would cause other animals issue. And that also goes into what these lizards also do if they are threatened. Not only will they dart away, if they do feel significantly threatened, they will also puff themselves up to appear bigger. So kind of think like a pufferfish. And what this will actually cause, this will cause the spines on the head and on the sides of the bodies to actually protrude, making it extremely difficult to swallow. So basically, if it cannot run away and hide, it will try and puff itself up to say, it's going to be very difficult to eat me, you probably shouldn't even try it. Now, these lizards can communicate with each other, and what they'll do is they'll actually have head bobbing. So if two males are trying to communicate, saying stay away from my ant pile, things like that, they'll actually have some head bobbing act. And what's really interesting is that these head bobbing maneuvers are actually very species specific, meaning that a Texas horned lizard cannot communicate with like a round-tailed lizard. They're very species specific in their communication. Now, this is listed as a threatened species in Texas, and make no mistake, these are a species that is in trouble, especially in the future. There are many people that argue about this, especially farmers and ranchers in the state. because on farms and ranches, these are very, very sort of abundant, you might want to say. But it's sort of a combination of factors. Not only is the farms and ranches prime habitat for this species of lizard, but farmers and ranchers are usually out looking at the land quite more often than most other people. So they see these lizards more often, and they have it in their mind that that means that this species is not in trouble. That is very wrong. The Texas horned lizard might be locally abundant, meaning you might be on a particularly in your particular area, there could be plenty of them. However, across their entire range, they are in trouble right now. And that is through a couple of different reasons. One of the main reasons, I believe, is fire ants. Fire ants are an invasive exotic species that actually push out the native harvester ant. And the harvester ants, being 70% of their natural diet, really puts a strain on them for finding food and resources. Another issue with these is pesticide use. Pesticide usually kills vegetation, which that is what the harvester ants are actually eating. So it's just kind of a trickle-down effect. And then lastly, of course, is habitat destruction. The more rural areas that get impacted by that get turned into suburban areas, urban sprawl is definitely a consideration. Very immobile species. So now, the fun fact that we are going to end this video on, and most people in the state of Texas actually are very knowledgeable about this fact, but since this is obviously going on YouTube and going potentially global, I want to really talk about an interesting fact that may not be as interesting to Texas, but definitely out there. And that is the fact that this has one more defense adaptation. When it is stressed out, when it is scared and doesn't want to be eaten, basically, this animal has one last defense adaptation to stop predators from eating. And that is, it actually has the ability to squirt blood out of the corners of its eye. And it's actually it's technically the eyelids, not the eye. But it's not just that they can squirt out, it's that they can actually aim that squirt of blood. And that blood is not just, 3 inches or something. There have been reports that this squirt of blood can reach up to 5 feet, about 1.5 meters in distance. So, you're 3 feet away from this deal and it's super stressed out. It can physically squirt blood directly at you. And what it actually does to do this, and why it takes a little bit of time, is they restrict the blood flow leaving the head. So basically they physically stop blood from leaving the head. Blood still comes in, but they cannot let the blood out. And that increases the blood pressure within the head to the point that it ruptures blood vessels in the eyelids. And that's how they get that. So it just builds up a ton of pressure and then pops, basically. And they aim that pop. But not only this, and this was something that I found extremely interesting that I was unaware of, that blood is actually mixed with a chemical that makes it foul tasting to canines. So they're actually trying to squirt that blood into the mouths of like a coyote or a fox that is trying to eat it. And that basically gives them such a foul taste in their mouth that they no longer have any want to eat. So definitely something. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you again. If I don't, please be safe. Have a great day. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you do. I'd really appreciate it, and I'd hope to see you again